Hello, and thank you for joining us in our inaugural Wednesday live stream. We're going to try to do this every week. We're going to try to get a special guest in every week. This week we've got a guest I'm very excited about. We've got a guest I'm very excited about this week. You'll meet him in just a minute. In the meantime, if you haven't yet, go ahead and say hi down in the chat. Give it a like if you haven't already. That really helps with the algorithm. Real quick, I want to go over a couple of things that we talked about in our stream earlier this week. I know that there were a couple of issues with the video quality in that. I didn't quite have the settings all set up, so I just want to show you these two things real quick. First, we have the Lucretia Report store got launched just earlier this week, and I can pull that up right here. We've got some really awesome merchandise on there for some great prices. We never charge a pink tax, and every dollar goes straight towards supporting independent progressive media. So check that out, lucretiareport.com/store. We also just updated our Patreon page. We added a bunch of new tiers at patreon.com/lucretiareport. So be sure to go check that out. We've got a whole bunch of benefits, early access to videos, patron Zooms, all that kind of stuff that you can go check out there. So I'm really excited about that. Also, if you haven't yet, go ahead and follow on all our social medias. They're all linked in the description. All right, now let's go ahead and get to it. He's a musician, he's an activist, he's an employer, he's the founder and executive director of Hip Hop for Change, a nonprofit based out of Oakland, California that's working to advance the cause of social justice and racial justice through music and hip-hop. It's Khafre Jay. Let's go ahead and introduce him. Hi, Khafre. Awesome. It's going well. Before we start, we got some news on the racial justice front right before we got in here. We woke up this morning to find out that, very sadly, 2 protesters had been killed and 1 injured by we don't know if he was a white supremacist, but at least a radicalized, he seems to be police-obsessed 17-year-old in Wisconsin. And we also, just before I started this stream, I got a notification that the Milwaukee Bucks will be boycotting their playoff game tonight in solidarity with the protesters there. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that before we get started.
I mean, when you have a 17-year-old walking down the street with a rifle, and then you hear stories about police officers handing those vigilante, armed folks water bottles in full support of them, I don't know, lynching people, I guess, Number one, if I see a, Ku Klux Klan rally with them burning a cross, I'm not going to walk in there with a gun. Like, why do I want to go start some problems? Like, why do I want to go create that issue? Now, this is America. You can do whatever you want to. But if I walked in the middle of a KKK rally and went there with a gun and started threatening people, I think I would be responsible for whatever I received and whatever happened. Like, I would definitely have to be aware that something could go down. So this 17-year-old went there into the middle of a Black Lives Matter protest. I don't see him as doing that because he wanted to hold peace or protect things. Like, he wanted to walk down there with a gun and be Clint Eastwood, It's kind of like that guy who was in Salt Lake City with he jumped out, he drove through the Black Lives Matter protest, started yelling all lives matter from his driver's seat, in the middle of traffic with no exit strategy. And he goes and gets a bow and arrow with 1 shot, right? And he jumps out his car and starts threatening people. I think people get so caught up in their dreams of fighting against who they perceive as the enemy that's all they care about. They don't care about getting out safe, right? He didn't care about his own safety. He didn't even get to the exit strategy. He was so caught up and, enamored.
He got caught on video running away.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you don't have an exit strategy. Why would you go to a Black Lives Matter protest with a gun? Like, why would you do that and then say you're not the problem?
And unfortunately, it's hardly the first time. In Austin, Texas, a few weeks ago, probably, someone else got shot. In Detroit, I think there was another incident of this.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, being an activist and protesting has always been something dangerous, and especially when we've got authoritarianism, fascism being promoted from the highest levels of our government, from our politics. It's especially
Yeah.
dangerous now. So,
I mean,
shout out
went
to
to go
all the people
protest.
that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the best to them.
Yeah, when people went to go protest the mask wearing, for example, they went down armed to their capitals. I don't think I saw any like armed people going up there to try to cause trouble. So, short of people trying to burn, I mean, I don't know, short of people having Klan rallies at the Capitol, and that's a job for Antifa or who anybody wants to fight that.
Mm-hmm.
But if people want to go out and protest, I think you should let them do it. Let them do it, even if they have a stupid reason or a reason you agree with. But if you come down there with a gun, armed, and you're the opposition, and you're the opposite beliefs of the people going to congregate for their rights, I think you're causing trouble. And it's sad that a 17-year-old is probably going to lose his freedom because he has this racist dream of, shooting Black Lives Matter protesters. But we see this happening on social media, so I'm glad that we're speaking to it.
Yeah, and it makes me think of, because we can see in the videos that came out that he walked right past a bunch of police officers and they didn't stop him. And it turns out he has some kind of, that he knows some people in the police department or something. He wants to be a cop. But I'm just imagining if this was a black man who walked past these police officers with his rifle and what, and it makes me think of, what it makes me think of is in the 80s, I think, because Ronald Reagan was president. In the 80s, the Black Panthers to the California Capitol with rifles, and pretty soon, Ronald Reagan was governor, so it was before the 80s. Pretty soon, Ronald Reagan is passing gun control laws in California because black people have guns now. And just a few years ago, I can't remember his name, but there was a black man who was shot by police in his car because he had a legal
Alton Sterling
gun. Yeah, and the NRA, not a word about that, right?
Yeah, and when the Black Panthers went down there and I guess pushed their Second Amendment rights, to bear arms, and they did it at the Capitol. I think number one, it was during a press conference that Ronald Reagan was having, and all the press left Ronald Reagan and then went to go see these armed black people. The NRA came out and said, "Hey, whoa, wait a second, we're for responsible gun owning, and the Black Panthers, pushing their rights to bear arms didn't look responsible to them, so they were all down for gun control." So it's just interesting. Well, we all know the Second Amendment has never been for brown people, right? The Second Amendment has never been for us, and our rights are not upheld. Like when Mr. Sterling was asked if he had any firearms in the car, he did what he was legally required to do. To have an open carry or a concealed carry permit, you're supposed to tell a cop, "I do have a gun. Here it is," and you're not supposed to be shot for that, right? When Breonna Taylor just got murdered, right, and all these cops, are flashing lights into his house with this no-knock raid that is only allowed to happen because it doesn't happen in any other neighborhoods but black and brown people, right? Or else they
no uniforms, no identification,
none. And then this guy shoots one time, like, "Yo, get away from my house!" And then they turn the house to Swiss cheese, right? That guy didn't have no Second Amendment right to protect his family. He was. For all he knew,
those were burglars.
Yeah, and that's what. And then as soon as he realized they were cops, he started complying, right? And they still arrested him. They still tried to pin crimes on him, right? And when they could have said, "Hey, we got the wrong house. We made a mistake. You were doing the right thing," but they're not here to protect and serve citizens. They're here to uphold white supremacy. And we see that in every example. And that's why Black Lives Matter is a hashtag. You know what I'm saying? That's why we have Say Her Name and all this other stuff, because they're not here to protect and serve. They're here to uphold white supremacy, period.
Well, going into the questions I got for you today, Khafre, first of all, a lot of our viewers may not have heard of Hip Hop for Change. And it's got a pretty unique cause. Like I said in the intro there, you use music education as a way to fight for social justice. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Hip Hop for Change and why you started it, what you do on a day-to-day basis, all that?
Yeah, I've even been honing my language and understanding of how to explain what Hip Hop for Change does. And, I think, essentially hip hop is a social justice thing for me and for the community, right? It's the equitable transfer of resources, whether they be financial, whether they be knowledge-based or whatnot. Historically, Black and brown people have been pushed out of the economy, right? We've been redlined, we haven't been hired, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
So, even culturally, hip hop has a lot of elements of hustle, right? Entrepreneurialism, creating our own economic base and self-determination. The problem is that generally speaking, everything that Black and brown people create, corporations take it and beat us down over the head with it, right? And then use that to entertain the people with all the money, i.e. suburban white people. So what I think that we're doing, I was the first Black director for Greenpeace San Francisco, and I learned grassroots fundraising and organizing. And essentially what I've come to understand is that all we've done is not anything new within hip hop. We just found a way to get a 501c3 status, to get permits and insurance, so that when we do our street hustling like hip hop has always done, right, that the cops can't arrest us, right? That when we go to throw shows and events, that we have more efficacy to do so because we've been able to acquire resources. And really what Hip Hop for Change is an organization that's trying to build a base of self-determination for people of color with our own cultural expression, in our own culture, hip hop. Because right now we got 3 companies owning 90% of the depiction of hip hop and the production of the mainstream corporate hip hop today. And that's sold about 80% to white people in America. So they're not marketing to us. It's extremely limiting, and it's not an empowering message. It's criminalizing Black and brown youth. So when I engage in hip hop, I mean, you saw Hip Hop for Change's office. Hip hop doesn't look like it looks on the TV in the community. In the community, most of our artists are educators. They work with kids. They teach, or they're speaking truth to power. Or these are the people you want your kids around, mentoring those who want to be hip hop too. So how do we support those artists? Because I'm really sick of hip hop artists that have so much to say and so much important stuff that needs to be heard, but they can't get a paycheck to produce that stuff and invigorate our community. They have to go work in somebody else's community, invigorate their community, and hope when they come home, they're not so beat and tired that they can still try to invest in their own creativity or organizing their own community. So that's what Hip Hop for Change is really for.
Yeah, a lot of people like to imagine that racism and white supremacy is just people's personal feelings. It's like, like Black people or not. And it's really this whole social economic structure. Like, Black people are by a significant margin the lowest average income, average wealth racial group in the United States. And like you're with all of the systematic things, not just now, but over the course of hundreds of years, 400 now, that have been designed to or whether it's intentional or not, have held black and brown people back.
Yeah, and I mean that's. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just say, even if you just look at redlining, owning a home is one of the number one sources of family wealth for a lot of people. Yeah. And over the course of generations, when an entire group of people is excluded from that, what are the ripple effects down the generations going to be?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the transfer of money in this country is through inheritance. So, like we talk about when you give a corporation money, that goes to sit in the Cayman Islands. It doesn't go to reinvest. If you give a person in a community that's poor money, that instantly goes into investment and whatnot. We talk about World War II, and when all these GIs came back, right? And we still were dealing with the problems from the Great Depression and whatnot. So what do? Well, you invest in your population, right? You invest in the proletariat, you invest in your people, right? You give them, you sign bills to help them get housing, right? Help them get jobs and loans and all this stuff. But those loans weren't given to people like me, right? And we were definitely excluded from owning homes in the suburbs. Not to mention the project program, like the federal housing program, which was supposed to be this new revolution in how to house people, but it was just how to house Black and brown people and put them over here. So yeah, those financial investments back, in the 40s and 50s, they turned to social capital for those people who got those investments. They went to schools, right? They went to Ivy League colleges, and then they met people, created relationships. And so their kids, when their kids needed to get a leg up, they knew people who ran companies, who ran business, because they had these capital, these investments before that allowed them to create businesses and create networks and whatnot. So, fast forward to now, and it's just interesting, the people who are most responsible for driving the culture of America, Black people, right? And more today, specifically Black women driving the culture, are the least invested in, when you talk about, who can really take this country into the next century without us losing our hegemony, without losing power as a nation, like, you can't have more than 50% of your population be Black and brown and not invested in it all, and then still think that you're going to be a strong nation. You can't build an economy off oppressed people, right? That looks like enslavement, and it just doesn't work. That just doesn't create the American dream. So if we want to see this country to be, if we want to see this country thrive and prosper, and our kids be cool, it doesn't matter what you look like now. You better start, supporting Black and brown people actually coming into equity and making sure that we have equal access to the American dream, because we will not be the America that people want to be great, while we're literally predating on people economically and predating on most of the people in our nation. So I don't know.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you touched on this a little bit, but one of the things that you talk about a lot with Hip Hop for Change is the way that corporatized hip hop promotes white supremacy in your message, or at least stereotypes, things like that. But a lot of hip hop artists are Black and brown people. A lot of them are social justice advocates. They're people that if you ask them, they would tell you that Black Lives Matter. So how do you, why and how do you think that these people who would tell you that Black Lives Matter are actually promoting the opposite?
First off, I would say, Lil Wayne, he told you he didn't care about Black Lives Matter, right? He said he cared about his objectified women. That's what he said. Jay-Z working with the NFL and kind of kneecapping Kaepernick and the movement around trying to, give Black and brown people's struggles to be valued within the NFL shows that Jay-Z might not, be vibing with Black Lives Matter as well. So I don't know what percentage of all these corporate rappers care about Black Lives Matter. So I don't even want to think that they all do care about BLM, because I think care is an action more than just a statement, right? You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people do ask me that question when I do my work in the streets. Hip Hop for Change is built off a grassroots movement where we go into affluent white spaces, have about 50,000 conversations about the co-optation of hip hop every year. And we hear this all the time. Well, aren't they rapping about what they want to rap about? Well, every community has idiots, right? Every community has people that objectify women. Every community, regardless of color, has people who are violent or who like guns or who are nice and who are sweet and who are great parents. And, we're a community, right? The problem is when you have a corporation, when you have an industry that says, hey, wait a second, the people who created this beautiful culture don't have any money. So where are we going to get the money from, right? Oh, man, look at these kids in the suburbs who have all this money, and they don't even care about the cultural norms and values or, respectability or whatnot. So they're even easier to market to, because all media is about sex, drugs, and violence. All of it, whether it's All My Children or General Hospital, or whether it's, punk rock and mosh pits and, all whatever, it's all the same. The problem where we have right now is the 96 Telecom Act allowed for the corporate consolidation of media to take this into 3 corporations that have 90% control of everything. And they get to choose who they invest in, right? And that's the problem. That's the issue, because they could invest in all the great people. My young daughter, she needs to hear people like Lauryn Hill and MC Lyte. But those people aren't marketable to the suburban white college-age males between 18 and 24 who consume 70% of hip-hop. What they want to see is Cardi B, right? So they're only buying people that look like Cardi B. And what that does is that limits the ecological niches that are available to different types of rappers, right? Wherein brown and Black people need to have a huge, diverse, dynamic representation of our culture so we can know who we are, see who we are, and you know, have access to our own efficacy. You see examples of that. But unfortunately, when it's, you know, suburban white males who dictate what's invested in, then we only see one woman on top at a time, because there's only one economical niche for women to get a paycheck from in hip hop, and that comes from big booties and whatever. And we don't have to talk about whether or not women should control their bodies. That's not the conversation. Of course, women should control their bodies, and Cardi B is amazing, right? Megan Thee Stallion is awesome. But what we need is to have a diversity there, because my daughter might not want to be a Cardi B. She might want to be an MC Lyte or a Queen Latifah or a Moni Love or a Nitty Scott, right? Or a Rhapsody or a No Name. And so why doesn't No Name have the same amount of paychecks to go after? Well, when Black and brown people controlled hip hop, there was a lot of different types of paychecks for a lot of different types of artists. And that's what the problem is. Right now, we only have an extra communal group of people that are buying into this really limited narrative. And that's not what Black and brown people need from our hip hop. What we need to do is see the entirety of our experience. So that's why corporations, that's why white supremacy is really the thing, because all these suburban kids, they don't want to see us looking the best that we look, you know? They don't want to see us rapping about rocket science and the environment, and they don't want to see us rapping about white supremacy and, you know, fight the power anymore. What they want to see is shaking booties, mumble rap. They want to see people talking about the same old, because really they're not even trying to listen to lyricism. They just want to turn up. So yeah, the biggest part of white supremacy in hip hop right now is the fact that corporations are basically only putting out narratives that add to the criminalization of Black and brown bodies, narratives that reinforce what police fear about us, what white folks fear about us, you know, violence, misogyny, racism, homophobia, and that's such a small sliver of who our community is. So that's why Hip Hop for Change is really important, because we're trying to create more economic niches for real people in our community to take advantage of and be supported, you know. And whoever controls the narratives that your community has access to is God, is controlling what you can do in your efficacy. So that shouldn't be corporations. That should be people like
control over the media. It controls your mindset, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if you ever worry that, because you're going to schools and you're promoting hip hop music as a genre, you're promoting positive hip hop music, but hip hop as a genre more broadly. And I wonder if you ever worry that by doing that, you're going to drive people towards this corporatized hip hop that you're talking about.
No. And I don't even really think that we're promoting hip hop as a genre, right? I mean, I think what we're doing mostly when Marlon Richards, our education director, goes into schools now, and mind you, we taught 22,000 kids K through 12, right? The reason why these kids are hungry is because either they're hip hop cultured kids and they walk hip hop, talk hip hop, dress hip hop, but all they get access to is hip hop as a genre. And it's really kind of, you know, it only looks one way. So what we do is we don't promote hip hop as a genre, and we don't tell kids they have to rap positive. We don't even just promote conscious artists, but what we do is teach these kids about the history of hip hop. Right. And then we teach these kids about what hip hop has had to deal with and the white supremacy that hip hop has been fighting. And you don't really have to tell them what to rap about. Kids just want to talk about who they are. Kids want to affirm their own sense of positive identity with their own creation. I think the problem that I had as a 15, 16-year-old Black kid in Hunters Point, San Francisco, who was drenched in toxic masculinity, right? Trying to figure out my own power and my own self-worth, right? I'm getting bombarded by images that I have to treat women this way, or I have to have this much money, or I have to do this to be valued. And we're just trying to figure out how we can, you know, be worth something. So I spent all this time rapping about stuff that actually was just fake, right? It wasn't until I was like 20 or 30, 20, 21, and I really started rapping about, you know, my experiences, right? Police brutality, the thing that was happening right on 3rd Street, gentrification, right? The environment, you know, whatnot. Then I started really affirming my value as a person, you know, somebody who could speak truth to power. That stuff made me feel more empowered as a Black man than I've ever felt in my life. And I think back, if I was taught at 15 and 16 to rap about the police brutality that I was experiencing, I probably would have had more tools and more coping mechanisms to deal with how it was, how police brutality was killing me, getting beaten up at gunpoint several times before I was 18, right? What if I was rapping about police brutality instead of cars I didn't have and girls that didn't even like me? Maybe I would have not, maybe that wouldn't have hurt me as bad. Maybe I wouldn't have as much PTSD. And that's what hip hop really is for kids. It's expressive arts. So I don't go in and promote positive hip hop. I go in and promote kids understanding their history and understanding the truth. And if they're hip hop culture, then they need to know that their culture is beautiful. If they're hip hop curious, then they need to know what hip hop actually is, so they don't get conditioned and have their conditioning conditioned with white supremacist ideas about who black people, who brown people are, or who women are, or who whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned your daughter earlier, and you talked about yourself as when you were a child experiencing police brutality and all that. And ever since racial justice has been in the news in the last few months, we've been hearing people on TV talking about how black parents have to have the talk about police with their children. And as a black father, you've got to look at the world and worry about what we're going to leave behind for your daughter. And so I'm wondering, what do you think are the most urgent things we need to address in that, and how do we do that? When the challenges are this big, what's step one?
I mean, the step one is just, first off, let's take a step back, right? What is white supremacy? Why do people get to have white supremacist ideas? It's because they don't know the truth, right? If little Timmy, if Karen, when she was in middle school, actually learned real American history, right? Right now we have Texas, and the Texas educational system, which I've heard is responsible for half of the country's textbooks. And they're no longer calling slaves. They're saying they're immigrant workers in some of those textbooks, right? You have this whole reimagining of the Southern, like the lost cause, right? To where, the Civil War wasn't about slavery. It was really about states' rights.
I learned that the Civil War was about states' rights in school. States' rights and taxes is what they taught the Civil War was about.
Oh. Now, so this is it, and you had to unlearn that. Lies my teacher told me, right? Mm-hmm. This is the problem. It's like people think, oh, I have to have this fat conversation with this racist, and hopefully they'll learn. No, really, people who are over 20, good luck to y'all. If y'all racist, good luck to y'all. None of my efforts as a black man will be to try to, well, I'm not gonna say none, because I do engage in certain conversations sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I think the most important thing is these young kids, they need to learn the truth. The truth is shall set us free. So if you teach these kids what the Trail of Tears was for real, and how many massacres the indigenous folks here went through, and how many treaties that were broken. If you show them the history of America and show them how much was slavery and how much was Jim Crow, and teach them what Jim Crow and what terrorism happened during Jim Crow. If you teach them about how many times white people rioted and burned down black and brown people's neighborhoods, cities, while killing us, then they would be like, oh, snap, we never gave anybody a chance, did we? Right now, when you go to Glenn Beck's page, and I'm actually, I like Glenn Beck's page just because I like to sharpen my tongue. But when you go there, these people think that we have no reason to be out in the streets protesting because they think we face no racism. Matter of fact, some people nowadays are putting out this BS that white people face more racism than anybody in this nation, right? And the only possible way they can even have that conversation is if they're just ignorant and uninformed. So I think the most important thing is, if you're over 20 and you're racist, good luck to you. If you're under 20 and you're racist, then Hip Hop for Change will try to come to your school and teach you what black and brown people have been through and how beautiful we are. And hopefully 100 years from now, because, sorry. Hey, Kalia, if you're watching this in the future, I hope we did something to, make it easier for you as a black Mexican woman in America. I'm so sorry that we're leaving you this, but I don't think it's going to be fixed for her. Right? I think that she's going to have more efficacy to stand up and speak truth to power, because we're going to create our own community, structures that are going to protect her. But as a whole, I don't think that white supremacy is going in the next decade or two. I do think that it can, go by the end of this century if we start right now and changing the way we teach kids the history. I just saw a story online that said, this teacher in South Carolina put up the 10-point plan from the Black Panthers. And all the white parents are mad saying, oh, you're indoctrinating our kids. Well, she also has history of Stonewall and history about Muslim people, but nobody gets that. All they hear is the Black Panthers are racist, and they're forming their opinions without knowing any history on the Black Panthers. So we see the problem.
People actively pushing back against. Just recently, Tom Cotton, who's the senator from Arkansas, he wanted to defund schools that taught 1619 curriculum. 1619 or 1690, is it?
19. So
19 curriculum.
Yeah.
All that is teaching about the history of slavery, Jim Crow, and all of that
happened
in this country.
So what we have to understand is that over the last 100 years, our education has literally been whitewashed to the point where the only thing we learn about, Black people, for example, is Rosa Parks was tired. That's why she didn't want to get up. Instead of her being one of the most prolific investigators that helped stop, women being raped and all. She's such a prolific civil rights figure. But we only learned that she got tired one day, So why aren't we teaching kids that? We only learn about George Washington Carver, and he messed around with peas and peanuts. We don't learn about what he had to do in order to be a scientist. I heard he had to be chemically castrated in order to be able to be allowed at his college. And I got to look back up into that. But if you start teaching kids what we had to go through, then we don't even have to worry about them, right? Kids want to be good. They want to be right. They want to do the right thing. They want hugs. They want love. And in order to do that, they have to see people as their kin, right? As their family, as humans. And that's what white supremacy does most to white folks. It disallows them to see me as a human, right? It takes away a bit of their ability to empathize with a huge portion of American people. And that sucks. And that creates fear. That creates all this. And Tom Cotton, he has no idea what the 1619 Project is because he's never heard. I don't know him at all, and I normally shouldn't be able to speak for somebody I don't know and don't know what they've done. But I put my next few paychecks on the fact that he's never heard anything from the people who created the 1619 Project. You can't be that ignorant and have actually known what it's about. So again, the truth shall set you free. We just got to wait for people like Tom Cotton to pass on to the next, whatever it is. I'm sorry. I will not shed a tear when he does. You know what I'm saying? But I will breathe a sigh for all the young Black and brown people when he does. Like, ooh, man, we don't have to deal with him no more. And that's really what it is, because these people are so invested in the slow death and destruction of my people. And I'm sick of it. This is a war. It's just a long, drawn out, cold war.
I'd also like to say to Texas public schools that I went to, there are more famous Black people than George Washington Carver and Martin Luther King. Those are only two Black people in history.
Yeah. God, we have such a rich history, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're halfway through the stream right now. So something I want to do in each stream is I want to play a little game to get something fun for the audience. So what I think of this as is kind of like political bar trivia.
Oh, no. Okay.
Let's go through this. And audience, if you got the answers, comment down in the chat there. And let's see what we've got. So, police apologists like to cite the fact that more white people are killed by police than Black people, which is true, as a means of denying racial disparities in police brutality. In 2019, 370 white people were killed by police in the United States, and 235 Black people were. This, however, fails to account for the fact that Black people make up a much smaller portion of the population. Relative to the portion of the population, how many more Black people were killed by police in 2019 than would be proportional to the proportion of the population? Is it 30% more, 50% more, or 80% more?
80%!
It is 80% more. That is insane. There are only 13% of the U.S. population is Black, and something like 72% is white. And
9 times more likely.
Yeah, and 235 to 370 is not that much of a difference. It's 80% more than would be proportional.
Did Trump's cabinet come up with those numbers? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm joking.
I said,
I'm joking.
follow up to that. How many fewer white people are killed by police than would be proportional to the population? 10% fewer, 15% fewer, or 40% fewer?
40. It's gotta be 40.
It's 40. Well, it's 36 technically, but I round
Okay.
make it less obvious. But yeah,
Of course.
36%, just about 40% fewer white people are killed by police than would be proportional. That's so. Next time someone tries to quote those numbers about more white people being killed by police, tell them they don't know what the hell they're talking about there.
Can we also point out the fact that, number one, if people are espousing these idiotic numbers, right? They're doing two things. One, they're either doing this on purpose. They're doing this knowing that they have not done the entirety of all the statistical math analysis they need to do to paint the picture. So they're doing it on purpose, and F those people, right? Forget those people. Or they just literally are looking at a meme on Facebook or Instagram, and they're not doing their own research.
The number of people who get their information from memes, it's insane.
So the only reason why we can even have this problem is because, number one, people are not researching because they don't care about knowing. They just see something that affirms their own understanding of life, and they just like, yep, that makes total sense. Black people deserve it. They have no right to protest, and I'm not going to do any more further looking into this. Again, you're a sheep, all right? And then the other people who are making the memes are just evil, and they're just evil.
Yeah. Speaking of those people who are trying to come up with excuses, last month Sean Hannity tried to justify Donald Trump's illegal use of stormtroopers to suppress peaceful protests in Portland, Oregon, by listing supposed violent incidents in Portland. On the screen, he listed 17 incidents. How many of these 17 incidents were just graffiti?
16.
14, you were close. It's 14 of these incidents were just graffiti. One of them was a broken window, and 2 others were generic property damage. So, wow, I'm super scared, Sean.
We've got to violate people's rights now, huh? Right?
Yeah, oh my god, they spray painted a wall. It's insane. I can't...
And also, he can go hold up a Bible like he's never touched a Bible before in his life. And the archbishop of that church was so offended that Trump did that she got on, and I encourage everybody to go see her words. You know, she was so offended that Trump was using her God, you know, for a photo op, and also doing what is the antithesis of what Jesus would do. Right?
I saw one of the pastors of the church come on, or priest. I don't know if it's a Catholic or Protestant church, but I saw one of the pastors or priests come on the next day on CNN, and not happy about it either. He also said, surprise, surprise, that Donald Trump had not gone to church there in like a year or something.
Right. And never talked to her.
This is a bit of a tangent, but what's his Cardinal is his title. Cardinal.
Cardinal. Yeah.
He spoke at the RNC the other night, did the prayer, the invocation, that's the word.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how the Pope is okay with him politicizing the church like that. I'm surprised. Whatever, though. But
I mean, so now there's a whole conversation about who's really for, love and Christianity, and, and if the Vatican actually cares. The Vatican is sitting on so much money. They could stop.
Also, by the way, Joe Biden is an actual Catholic.
He is, right? He is. But the Vatican is sitting on so much money that they could do a lot to end poverty. They could do a lot to empower people, and they don't, right? I run a radio show on KPOO, and there's a lady, Riri, right before my show. She runs the Good Gospel Show at 10 o'clock on KPOO. She was mad, and she said, "You know what? I haven't seen any of these pastors out there at the protests laying hands on protesters, right? Saying, hey, you're going into this crazy situation. Let me pray for you real quick." Where are the churches?
I want to show you something I just pulled up a picture of here. I'm going to make a little window capture here, and I want to show you this. Sorry, let me just open up the window capture. There it is. Take a look at this. This is called the Throne of St. Peter, and this is the Pope's throne in,
Gold. It's
oh, you
gotta be
can't
all
see this
cut.
on the Zoom, can you? Okay. Well, everyone on the stream can see this. This is called the Throne of St. Peter, and how much good could all of the wealth that's in just that chair do for the
So
world?
I can't see it, but I think I can imagine what that chair looks
Mhm.
like, and imagine what the room it's sitting in looks like. And yeah, it makes no sense to me, right? It makes no sense. We go from a guy who kicked over the money changers tables and was like, "This is not right." You know what I'm saying? A guy who was, I guess the story showed Jesus as a prolific, protester, right? A really progressive guy that, that wanted to fight the powers that be and said, you don't need the church. You don't need to pay them money. We can go have church on the banks of the river, right?
Mhm.
And church is in here. And that was the big blasphemous thing that he did back in those days. He said, the church is not that building over there where they're taking your money. The church is in here, right? You have to
Mhm.
walk in the footsteps. How do we go from something like that to the Vatican? I don't know, right? I don't know. So, I don't want to knock anybody's religion. I don't want to, that's not what I'm here
Mhm.
for. But I think religion is all good. And I think religion is a part of human evolution, right?
Mhm.
But I think organized religion is the devil. And power corrupts absolutely. And the consolidation of power is what we see when we look at something like the Vatican. And we can see that in that chair right there. They need to take all that gold and melt it down and then give that to people so they can eat. And yeah, I'm not even gonna speak.
Yeah. Going on with the game. So,
Yeah.
many people don't realize that before the end of Reconstruction, the presence of federal troops in former rebellious states had safeguarded the rights of black Americans relatively effectively. And throughout the period of Reconstruction, black voters were a significant portion of the electorate, and many black people were elected to office. That changed, of course, with the withdrawal of federal troops and the institution of Jim Crow. When Senator Blanche Bruce, the last black senator of the Reconstruction era, left office in 1881, how many years was it before another black senator was elected?
Um,
He left office in 1881. What do we think? How long? Ballpark.
99,
You're
94,
you're close. 86 years and then
86.
and then after that senator left office, I think there was another like 14-year gap. There have only been 10 black senators in American history. 3 of them are serving right now.
And, and, and,
Booker and
and,
Harris and Scott.
yeah, and also the thing that really killed Reconstruction, not only did the North have no more taste for protecting black people, but we had our only armed insurrection against the U.S. government in Wilmington. People, please look at that history. Again, white folks have had the monopoly on violence and rioting in this nation's history. So when there was
you
a
know
bunch
how
of black
everyone just learned about not everyone. You know how all the white people just learned about Tulsa? All the white people to
yeah.
go learn about the coup that happened in Wilmington.
Oh my God. If you see that, if you see literally how a bunch of white people said, okay, this town that's predominantly black and that elected by voting a bunch of black people, literally these white people said, no, we're never gonna let that happen. We can't let black people lead. I'd rather have the rivers run red before I let black people continue leading. And a white armed mob went in and killed everybody and burnt down all these
Overthrew
buildings.
the government, instituted a new led government.
Yeah, and then Congress just said, yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll take that senator. We'll take that congressperson. But they didn't care at all. So please, again, the truth shall set us free. I think the most important thing for people to do is learn your history, learn the real history, and get pissed off properly. And then once you get pissed off, utilize that to either free your people or to free other oppressed people. Jane Elliott, the cool social scientist, she said, I want white folks in this room to stand up if you don't mind being treated like black people. No white people got up. And she said, oh, so you're not standing up because you don't want to be treated like black people, right? So that means you know what's going on. But why are you so comfortable in letting black and brown people deal with what you wouldn't want to take, right? So as white folks, folks got to stand up. Folks got to at least be able to sit in a room comfortably with us and let's talk kumbaya. But that's it. Yeah. And the truth is going to get us there. And the only thing that can get us there is the truth.
I also want to point out, I said that 3 out of 10 black senators we've ever had are serving right now. But that's still 3 out of 100 senators, so that's not very many.
Yeah.
One more question in our game. Despite all of this, despite everything, according to an August 2019 YouGov poll, how many Americans think that white supremacy is either not a very serious problem or not a serious problem, or not a problem at all? 5, 25, or 50%?
Oh, 50%. I was about to say, like, is it 53? Is
Uh,
it 57?
it is 25. I still think that's pretty high though. But
Okay.
they break it down to 59% of Republicans, 29% of independents, and 4% of Democrats, but that's still a lot.
I question polls like that, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Because there's a lot of different levels of not thinking white supremacy is a problem. And I
Mm.
think unless you are actively like trying to fight
Yeah,
white
this is people
supremacy,
saying that they don't think it's a problem.
I bet you I could ask that question a little bit differently and change
Mhm.
those numbers any way I
Probably.
wanted to, right?
Probably. Well, you've won the game, Khafre. Congratulations.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of that, according to this poll, 25% of Americans don't think that white supremacy is a real problem. Possibly more, possibly much more. So, how do we reach people who, after all of this, are still on the fence like that? And so, how do we reach the people who aren't on? They don't think it's not a problem because they don't think it exists, but they don't think it's a problem because they like it. That
Not my chair, not my problem. Not my chair. No, sorry. I'm quoting a video I saw a while ago. But yeah, those people are not my problem, right?
okay.
I think, it takes so much work to explain to a man that women are oppressed, right? It takes so much effort emotionally to have to prove that you go through struggle to somebody that doesn't believe your struggle. I don't get paid enough to focus my efforts on that. Nor do I think it's important to get those 25% to believe in us. I don't. I think if you look at the amount of energy that I have, and then you look at who I can reach. Number one, there's a lot of people who agree with us, but just don't know that hip hop for change is here or know what they can do, right? And there's people who don't agree with this, and like, who are you going to waste your energy? Who are you going to spend your energy on? Those people who agree with you but haven't been activated as activists, or are you going to waste your time trying to prove to somebody that your experiences are valid? I think if we're talking about tactics, I think the smarter tactic is to try to grow your coalition. It's like Joe Biden and the DNC, right? They just had a whole rally talking about how bad Trump was. We all get that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody who's like voting for, Joe Biden. Like, you're not going to get any more people talking about how bad Trump is. But the way you do build up your coalition is by talking about what we can do and what change we want to create, right? Hey, let's talk about universal basic income. You're going to get more people on board with you. Let's talk about universal health care. That's how you grow your coalition, right? That's why Barack Obama was so successful at building this amazing group of people, more voters than ever, because he gave voters hope. And the thing that a lot of voters lack right now in America, and that's the reason why so few of our, population votes, is because we just don't have any hope for this country, I think, as a whole. So we just wasted a bunch of time at the DNC convention talking about how bad Trump was and didn't earn a single vote or a new voter, probably. I think what they should have spent 3 days on is talking about how we're going to change this to stop COVID as fast as possible, right? Like, why didn't Joe Biden spend time saying, hey, once I'm elected in 3 months, you're going to be able to go outside again, right? Or in 2
I think they spend a lot of effort trying to promote, maybe if they didn't go enough into policies, they at least spent a lot of effort trying to promote Biden as a person. And I was pleased to see some polling afterwards that said that a larger proportion of Biden voters are now voting for Biden and not against Trump. So that was a good result.
That's cool. But there's even a larger portion of people who haven't even heard from the Biden campaign, right? And there's a larger portion of like young people who want some hope, who have no hope and don't really believe in all these old folks because they didn't really do anything, right? So, and that's cool. And Biden does have to sell himself, right? I mean, for me, I just think of the 91 crime bill, and I'm just like, all right, this is a lesser of two evils for me personally. But yeah, I think we need to give our proletariat hope rather than just dumping on Trump if we want to build up a coalition that's larger. And I think that is kind of analogous to this conversation about these racist people who don't agree or don't see it as a problem. Like, I'm not trying to win them over. Really, I need to build up a group of people as fast as I can that's big to fight the powers that be. And I'm not going to do that trying to explain that that my reality is real. As fast as I'm going to do that, finding people who already believe my reality is real, they just don't know what we're doing. So that's it. I don't think we should waste time on those 25% at all. I think we just need to wait till they pass on.
Okay. I wonder, I think that a lot of people, especially now that a lot of people want to be woke, but they might not actually know how. A lot of people find themselves thinking that white supremacy or racism can be boiled down into characteristics. One that I think, one example is that a lot of people sometimes act like it's something that's from the South, and it's only from the South, and not true. Last year, there were 49 states last year had black people. I don't remember this was unarmed black people or black people in general, but it was 49 states last year had police killings of black people. Good job, Rhode Island, by the way, being the only one with it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the most segregated school districts in America are in places like New York. 31 states have Confederate monuments, even though there were only 11 Confederate states. And so, how do people recognize that they can be feeding into white supremacy, even if they don't think that they fit the mold of what a white supremacist is?
That's just ignorance. I mean, they don't understand what white supremacy or white supremacists are. I have so many conversations with people here in the Bay that says, oh, those racists, those are like this. And I have to tell people all the time, no, liberal racism is it's just as prevalent as conservative racism, and arguably harder to deal with. You know what I'm saying? I would rather somebody in Texas. I used to live in Houston, Texas, and who likes you and who don't like you. You know that more than you do in Oakland, California, where people will be like, I love black people, and then won't hire you. You know what I'm saying? And they don't understand why they're not hiring. They just, it's just a lot harder of an egg to crack. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if you look at again, truth, read your history, like understand history, understand that, when we tried to end segregation of schools, that was only for Southern states. They didn't mandate that the Northern states integrate. They didn't do anything for that. You know what I'm saying? That's why you have these laws that
there may not be de jure, there may not be legal segregation, but there's de facto segregation.
Yeah, 100% so. And so this is this whole thing. Like, I think people, since they don't have any investment in studying what racism has created, they don't know what it is, and they think that racism is just me getting called the N-word or somebody being like, I don't like black people. Really, I don't care about that type of racism. That type of racism is very easy to deal with. The racism that's hard is that structural racism where they put white folks here and black folks over there 40, 50, 60, 80 years ago. And how do you change that? How do you move certain people out of this neighborhood and then move certain people into that neighborhood so they're integrated? You can't. Like, how do you integrate the colleges now? Well, we tried affirmative action, but now people are suing saying we're discriminating against white folks because we're trying to get more equity in schools. So, I think we're in this really hard place where, we're going to have to make some tough choices. We talk about diversity and inclusion in corporations. And I think the biggest thing about that is you're going to have to hire some people of color, and some people are going to have to fire some white folks and give them those jobs. It's a really difficult conversation because we put ourselves in this really difficult conundrum. But again, it's like people have to learn what racism is. And in order to do that, you have to learn the reality of this country. This is the most racist place. Well, historically, I think our country's history is just the most evil history. I can't even say that. I'm really American-centric, U.S.-centric in my thinking. And the more I go global and talk to more global people and learn about the world, but I just think we need to teach people what racism is. And I think right now, suburban white people have a monopoly on the definition of racism, right? Merriam-Webster just changed it, like recently, when a black woman like reached out and said, hey, that's not all encompassing of what racism is. And then Merriam-Webster, fortunately, they've turned a corner and they said, okay, you're right. Let's change this, because the psychological definition of racism is, I personally think that you are worse than and I'm better than. But what about the sociological definition of racism? That was invented by white people in sociology, which we weren't allowed to talk about. When sociology was invented, that also takes into account society and how societies work. Because racism is more structural than it is anything. So if we can teach people that racism is a structural thing, then I think 30, 40 years after that, things will start to ease up.
Mm-hmm. Maybe 100. It's just like we were talking about earlier, that we were talking about people think it's a personal belief, but there's all this whole economic structure. And one of my pet issues is the way our schools are run. A lot of countries, America's very decentralized compared to most countries. And a lot of countries don't have schools as decentralized as we do. But one of the problems with that is, realtors will go in there and say, hey, this area has good schools. And you can say this area has good schools is really just an indictment of our school system, because it means that there are areas that have bad schools. And in the areas that have bad schools are usually lower income areas, where they have less property taxes, so they get worse schools, so they get lower incomes, so they have less taxes, so they get worse schools, so they have lower incomes, and it's this vicious cycle.
Yeah, and then they said there's more crime, so they put police departments in those neighborhoods, and then those neighborhoods get more tickets, and they become a debtor's prison, and then the city
bail
actually
bonds
becomes
and all that.
And then the city becomes reliant on predating on those Black and brown people, which creates more distrust, right? Less community investment. And the only thing that really, dictates how much crime a population has is poverty, right? But that also reaffirms the narrative that Black and brown people, they just want to be on welfare. They deserve to have those police there. And now you have a bunch of people who don't think Black lives matter. And I think that we are saying Black lives matter more, or only Black lives matter, because there's this whole racist structure that really, when we look at the populations that are being arrested, and then you look at the places where they're putting prisons in these rural neighborhoods that have no skin in the game of what these Black and brown people in the inner city are going through. And that's why when we want to try to close prisons down, who's the first people to say, hey, you can't close prisons down? It's those rural suburban white folks who are, working in these prisons, right? So we have such a disconnected population of people, and that's what's exacerbating all this stuff. When we talk about defunding the police, there's people who don't live in the hood who are saying that's ridiculous, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, you don't even live here. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? You don't even have to worry about that. And if we want to look, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an amazingly smart woman. And she said, we don't have to imagine if we want to look at what defunded police look like. If you want to look at that, look at the suburban white neighborhood. That's where police are not, getting 50% of the income of that city, right? That's where they're investing in after school programs, right? In their schools, in healthcare, in all kind of stuff, and not the police, right? So that's what a defunding the police looks like. Because if you look at my neighborhood, if you look at San Francisco, how much of the budget of San Francisco is going towards the police? If people knew how much of the budget was going towards policing and how little was going towards mental health, and how much we're asking police to actually be psychologists when they go out there with their guns and their biases, then they would be like, yo, let's defund the police. And that's like fund some help. So we've got to teach people the truth. And if they can't learn the truth, then we just got to stop prioritizing, teaching them the truth, and get to the people we can teach, so we can create a groundswell as fast as possible. And my daughter Kalia can be safe.
Knock on wood on that. We're getting close to finishing up, so I want to give you an opportunity real quick to tell people why they should support your organization, and how can they, if they want to, how can they support Hip Hop for Change, and why?
Hip Hop for Change is more than anything a jobs program. We've employed over 900 people, and our jobs program, although COVID-19 kind of knocked it out, it will come back, and we will be in a position to support more people with work. And that we've also taught 20,000 kids K through 12 and taught them the history of hip hop and how to engage in positive, healthy self-expression. Half of those classes have been taught for free, since we don't turn down broke babies who need to know that they're beautiful. And we throw fat hip hop shows and events. We have a radio show that gives artists artists the efficacy to get their voices out there. And we're investing in that platform more and more. Right now, we're building a studio that's world class. That's going to be in the East Bay Community Center. We rented a new room, and we're building a studio that's going to be free for kids under 24, so they can get that stuff off their chest. They can come from the juvenile authorities and get directly in the studio and, create an album that's going to keep them off this, keep them out of jails or whatnot. I don't know. A lot of kids need to get stuff off their chest, especially in places like Oakland. So when you donate to Hip Hop for Change, you're going to donate to people who have already dedicated their lives to positive, healthy self-expression, mentorship, passing on that knowledge, and you're going to help us take that a lot further. I think Hip Hop for Change is the coolest organization in the world. I'm a little biased, but go to hiphopforchange.org. Subscribe to our newsletter. First thing, it's going to be in the top left of the page to make sure you can stay up to date with what we're doing. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just type in Hip Hop for Change anywhere, and go check out our videos on YouTube so you can get inspired. Stick with us, because really investing in the culture bearers of our community is how you get out our message, right? It's how you empower. And the revolution might not be televised, but we're going to be rapping about it every single day. So if you want your little homies to hear about it, remember, one of our artists said, yeah, y'all had our ancestors, but we got your kids. And that's never been more true than today. So if you want to empower the community, get them psyched up to fight the powers and get more woke, invest in something that these kids are already excited about, right? Invest in one of the most empowered, powerful communal narratives the world has ever invented, that is worldwide right now, and that these kids are primed to use for empowerment. So go to hiphopforchange.org and holla at your boy. All right?
Awesome. Yeah, guys, if you're able to, definitely go donate, hiphopforchange.org. Also follow them you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter. Can they just search Hip Hop for Change, or?
Our SEO is on fleek, man. So yeah, just type in hip hop, hip hop activism, hip hop education, or just hip hop for change. Kind of like that, right? Oh, that right there. hiphopforchange.org, and rock with us. Pretty soon we'll be all around the nation, all around the world, and we need everybody we can.
Awesome, man. Well, that was Khafre Jay, executive director and founder of Hip Hop for Change, musician, activist. Thank you for joining us, Khafre.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate you folks, all right?
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us there. I also told you I'll give you a coupon code with every stream. I'm going to try to make it benefit whoever we're streaming if I can. So for the next week until our next stream, if you go to lucretiareport.com/store and use the coupon code HH4C, you'll get free shipping on any item, and we're going to donate $2 to Hip Hop for Change for every purchase. So definitely do that. Definitely go to hiphopforchange.org. Donate directly there. You can find all the links to our social media down below. Find Hip Hop for Change on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And be sure to tune in. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for our week in review, Saturday for our main video. Be sure to tune in next week for another stream with Sylvia Salazar of Tono Latino. She's a progressive YouTuber who's working to get Latinas to register to vote, to fill out the census, do all of that great stuff. So we're going to be talking to her next week. I'm super excited for that. And also, we're sending out our first newsletter on Friday, so make sure you sign up at lucretiareport.com/email-list. If you haven't yet, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like the stream, do all that stuff, leave a comment down below. And I'll see you guys next week.
Oh, you are? Okay. How was it?
Yo, man. Good.
And then you want to take the camera or not?
You cheesehead. You cheesehead. Come here. Come here.